demolish it. We don't have any such regulations.
And it's very important that if you care about particular buildings and you're concerned about them, that you be able to come to the hearing and testify and speak directly so that there's a record of public support for those buildings, and to put your thoughts also in writing and send them to the Landmarks Commission. We'll make sure that you have the information about how to do that.
Has that detailed report been published, and
No.
where can you see it?
No,
When
it
would
has-
it be published?
When would they?
After the
Yeah,
state.
not until after.
Not before.
The way that the reports work, I mean, is that I'll do what they say. They say that they want to incorporate public information that they get at the hearing on the reports. At the hearing, that'll be on the 22nd, which I hope all of you will be at. There is a very draft report. They take in any information. I have seen information given at a public hearing incorporated in a report. And then they continue working on it. The professional staff continues working on it. At some point, they will send out building descriptions to all of the building owners to say, this is your building description, this is what we saw, is this correct? And that's a very important thing too, so everyone should be monitoring that. And then they gather all that. Then when the Landmarks Commission actually votes on it and to designate is when they publish the report. So it's,
I just wanted to mention that the Buildings Department does have regulations which are supposed to provide protection. I'm not advocating demolition in any way, but there is something in place. If it's not adequate, then of course it should be built upon, and we should look into that.
Linda?
Is there any precedent in Manhattan for a 37-block stretch of landmarking?
The Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District, which goes from 63rd to 96th Street. Yeah.
Assuming the district gets landmarked, it would seem to me that the LPC, the Preservation Commission, is going to be heavily taxed in manpower to review all these additional applications. Does anyone know if there is additional money budgeted for staff?
Good thing to ask when you testify.
and also that'd be a good thing to testify on March 16th if you're having fun going to mid-morning meetings. On March 16th, which is next Wednesday, at 11 o'clock, the Landmarks Commission is going to be testifying on their budget, and there will be an opportunity for public testimony. And I think that, any support you can give them in terms of getting more staff to help both designate and regulate this is always appreciated by the Commission.
So I'm sensing that the LPC staff is kind of shivering about the influx of new applications coming in.
I have spoken with LPC staff about this a little bit, and they are already regulating to some degree. They're doing a lot of notices of review as buildings, get their building permits. They are already, signing off on building permits for small things, and they're trying to balance it, is what I'm told. But they could always use more resources.
Alex, do you want to add?
It's also a good idea when you testify to make note that budgetary constraints are not a reason to not designate as districts. This is a separate issue in principle, and we should designate it with or without resources in place. So if we don't, we have no protections. It's also important to know that the real estate board has been lobbying heavily against this designation. So the more people that turn out, the better. Richard, any thoughts on it?
Well, I do think that the point about the real estate board, and I do think there are going to be focused efforts to carve out specific buildings. We know about the 86th Street building. I have a sense that the trigger for a lot of this in 2006 and 2007, the Sackman development, people who tore down the buildings at between 95th and 96th on the east side of West End. They are going to make efforts at the City Council to try and carve out the buildings between 84th and 85th on the east side of West End. The two brownstones there where they have plans to build a sliver building between the buildings. buildings on 84th and 85th. And there will be others. So again, the public support is essential. Our strategy at the council will have to be developed when that comes about, which will be either towards the end of this year or the beginning of next year. But we're certainly going to have to work in the council, and we're going to have to count a lot on Gail Brewer. I think if Christine Quinn is supportive of this, and what I'm told is she is, that we'll be able to stave off a lot of these efforts to carve out special interests, if you will, for development purposes. So we're going to have to work on this as a strategy proposition as this develops. And of course, if anybody has information where they're hearing of efforts, that should be communicated to us as quickly as possible so that we can focus on those and try and determine whether they are legitimate attempts at incursion on the new district.
Hi, I'm Melissa from the West 80s Neighborhood Association. I want to thank everyone for coming out. And I also wanted to agree with what Richard was saying earlier about this is a district as a whole, and so even though there may be some modern buildings here and there, it is the entirety of the district that really makes this area so special, and that includes keeping the buildings that Sackman wants, keeping those, because we already lost two, as you know, on West End Avenue, 95th, 96th Street. The developer wants the Gilbert brownstones, which are beautiful, and we've actually hired an architectural historian to analyze those buildings, not just their own value, but their value to the historic district. In terms of going against the real estate board and these developers, lobbyists, that's expensive. And my question is to everyone here, to experienced people, is do we need to hire our own lobbyists as a community?
All you need is our lead.
And if so, should we come together for more fundraising? These are my questions, because if we're going against professional lobbyists, what do we do as a community who really want to keep this historic district? By the way, the LPC created this historic district. They went out and created the boundaries. So that's my question, and you can go to my website, Lodge is a member as well, at west80s.org, and email me through there. But I pose that question to experienced panelists.
All right. There has never been a community-driven campaign in the history of the world that money didn't help. That's, I mean.
So how would you recommend, for those of us who are interested in preventing carve-outs, which would mar the visual aesthetics, how do you suggest we go about it as an interested community?
Richard is entirely correct, is that you'll have to develop a strategy, getting professional help, getting, professional architectural historians like you've done for the Gilbert buildings, are very helpful, to sort of refute the rationalizations for political action. Having people who are very familiar with the political apparatus, either as very involved citizens or as professional lobbyists, is also another route that can be taken and can be a useful one. Having a legal team on your side it's always, again, I've never seen a situation that having a lawyer on your side is a hindrance, at least because that might, at the very least, that might prevent the other side from taking legal action. So all of these things do require money, and do require, professional, could be very helpful to making your case. It's again very important, as Richard said, I need to stress the importance of this being a political process, and it's more than just, everyone will take their lead from Councilmember Brewer, but the City Council in and of itself acts on their own kind of agenda at times, and it's important to be very familiar with that political organization and be able to see where you can get as much influence as possible and to state your case in the best and strongest way possible. and that can be used.
Could you talk a little bit about the city council process?
Sure.
Especially in terms of this district, given that they're doing 3 different hearings, are they first of all, is LPC going to vote on each segment as it comes up, or are they going to do it at the end of the 3? And then how does it get to city council?
I'm going to presume, just the way the city works, is that the Landmarks Commission will have the hearing on the 22nd. They will, they will continue doing research. They will send out the building reports to the building owners. They will then they will probably vote on the first section. Now, whether or not they decide to have another section, in between that voting period. But the Landmarks Commission, as a city agency, does a certain number of historic districts a year. So my guess is for their own organizational goals, they'll probably, kind of cut it up over maybe 2 years or something like that. I don't know. That's just sort of my observations. So what will happen is, my presumption, and does anyone heard anything different from Landmarks that they would be doing it all in one?
Not sure. I'm not actually sure whether they're going to vote after each. I'm not sure whether they're going to vote after each hearing or all in one. I thought they were going to go step by step.
That's what I thought.
Vote, each one and contemplating the whole thing. But I don't think the city council is going to take it up until there's an entire district.
No, they have to.
They
have to. What happens is, after the Landmarks Commission votes, the area is designated. That's it. Except, then the City Planning Commission has 60 days to review the Landmarks Commission's action and issue an advisory report. After that, they then kick that to the City Council, who has a total of something like 110 days from the Landmarks Commission's action to either deny, modify, or affirm the designation. They can't enlarge the designation. They actually don't even need to positively vote to affirm it, but they tend to do that because that's they like doing that.
So what you're saying is that if there's a vote on the 22nd, that clock starts running.
Correct.
So they're going to have to do it section by section on the. So the 86th Street issue will come up after the 22nd, if they vote on the 22nd.
But
We'll find that out.
It's very unusual for them ever to vote, on the 22nd, so I just want to make sure that people don't expect to vote because
So when would they, in your experience, vote? Colleen?
it could be a month, it could be a year. I think what Simeon just said, the Normandy was one of the rare exceptions because people were just being flagrantly throwing, pushing out their windows. But otherwise, Alex, Alex might have been at the.
I think it's been extraordinarily quick so far. I mean, I'm very impressed by how fast they've been doing this. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do it really quite quickly.
But do you think they'll vote on the whole district, or are they going to vote section by section?
Well, the district is in sections.
I understand that.
Yeah,
Will
so-
they vote section by section, or will they wait for hearings on all 3 sections and then vote on the whole district, all 3?
Excuse me, they're named as 3 separate districts.
Yeah.
So I think it's a kind of clear message. They didn't just name it the West End Historic District and just throw everything in it. They have parceled it out to 3 separate historic district extensions, actually.
And they just have so many staff to actually write their reports. So my guess would be that they would do it section by section, just to have their report written, and then when that's finished, they can turn the next report.
And what they did by taking a sort of a very rare step by calendaring all of the districts, all the sections at once, is the Landmarks Commission promised that they would actually do all of this. As opposed, there are other districts that I'm working with, for example, in Park Slope. They have a very large extension too, and the Landmarks Commission only calendared one little section.
Okay, I just want to say that our elected officials should be put on notice that this is one of the questions that we all want to know what the answer is, because it would be nice to know, when you come on the 22nd and there's another hearing in June and another hearing in October, what kind of turnout do we get, do we want? And I must say, with everything that's been said, we've learned that when you pack the hall, that's what the Landmarks Commission needs to see. It's not, the letters are nice, the petitions are nice, it's nice to do all these things. The body makes the difference. Someone says,
We will find out. We will find out this week exactly what this process is, which I think is pretty clear, but we'll find out definitively from LPC. I'll do it myself, and then we will send out emails to everybody on the list defining this. Josette will try and do that together, is that all right?
Sure.
And
Good.
Monty,
Yeah,
make
is
a quick point, because
Yeah,
we've
is
got
Susan
one
Sullivan still here?
Yeah.
Susan?
No, she doesn't.
Okay. Susan Sullivan, the group for the church on 86th and Amsterdam, West Park, hired a lobbyist for the city council. And it was through the lobbyist effort and Gail Brewer's efforts that the church was designated. And I think that that's what has to happen now.
Howard, you have your hand.
Yeah, I want to second Melissa's issues and the discussion that's just raised. The issue of hiring professional lobby legal help as you go to the crucial stages, I think, is very, very important and maybe needs a lot more discussion. But be that as it may, in a couple of weeks, the people will be before the commission. So my question is, what opposition arguments are we anticipating at the hearing, and what are our answers to those arguments? In other words, cutouts are one thing, but what kind of general objection to the creation of this massive new district, et cetera, are we anticipating? Anything ingenious, anything new, anything out of the ordinary we need to be ready for and answer at the hearing?
Well, I can answer that a little bit. I think that the encapsulated version of what the opposition is going to be came from Spinola in his press release for the real estate board, which was basically that the lifeblood of New York City is development, and historic districts stifle development and create bureaucratic levels at which any changes to property have to be passed on, and that they are just simply opposing the restriction of the free market. I mean, basically, it's an appeal to the increase of values in the tax base from development that they are arguing. And of course, I think the answers to that are clear, that if anything, real estate values go up in historic districts, and the tax base is certainly protected, and it's certainly protected from all kinds of decrease in the attractiveness of particular districts like this district as a result of development, which often happens. Development often appeals to less, it can. There are all kinds of development, but development is not a sure thing for even the values that they're touting, and the values that they're touting aren't necessarily the values of the community in which they're trying to impose it.
I just want to say that the Central Park West Historic District, Upper West Side, has over 2,000 buildings. This is about 800 buildings. So there's a precedent for the fact that larger districts are not unusual, and the real estate board opposes everything. So it's not that they're just sending this one out and saying, oh my God, that's terrible. They, for us at that time, that was in 1990, they opposed it as well.
There's a hand that's been up for a long time.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on what the opposition would say. I think from an owner perspective, especially a larger owner, but even an owner of a townhouse or an apartment in a designated building or a building within a designated district, there's going to be cost concerns. And I think that the expense of 610, for example, although I think it's a very worthy expense and a beautiful outcome, would be the sort of thing that would frighten people.
Yeah, well, when I said that number, $5 million, I'm saying it, I know it's frightening, but I was trying to make a separate point, which is, I think that 80 or 90% of that would have been spent anyway, would have had to have been spent for the building to function. And the question is, are you going to spend all that money and have something that is not a good outcome aesthetically, is not going to do as well for values? I mean, the values of apartments have gone up, tremendously over the last 10 years, and many buyers have commented on the aesthetic of what we've done. And so, it's a double-edged sword. I'm not throwing the number out to scare people, and I don't want it to be used that way. I think there's a more subtle point there. And I really don't think that being part of landmarks, has added substantially to our cost. It just has directed our efforts and focused them so that we've gotten more bang for our buck, basically.
If I can just have a follow-up comment on that. certainly take the point,
Yeah.
especially with respect to 610.
Yeah.
But, I have heard from friends.
Louder.
In other neighborhoods, sorry about that. I have heard from friends in other neighborhoods that are landmarked, that, even minor repairs not only take longer, but cost more.
Well, it's always expensive to maintain older buildings. There's nothing inexpensive about it.
Right.
And actually, and there is, let's face it, there is a certain delay because you need to get a permit from the Landmarks Commission. But most of the work is staff level permits. So if it's a small job, even a large job like repairing parapets or something like that, it can be done at staff level. And speaking from somebody who has been in a co-op board for many years, president of a rather large co-op in a historic district, I live in Brooklyn Heights, it really helps the co-op board because it deflects. When shareholders come to you and say, I want this, you can say, well, it's the Landmarks Commission. Won't allow that. We need to do it a certain way. It focuses, and it also, I think it focuses the work that needs to be done, and it helps in large buildings. And in smaller buildings too, because you can go to the commission and the staffers there who are professionals can guide you and can help you if you need to replace your cornice or do, work like that. So, I don't see work like this being inexpensive outside of historic districts either.
The question of the 3 separate hearings brings up a very important question, and that is, while between the first hearing and the possible vote there and the calendaring and this and that, till we get to, since this is going to be done over a period of, you say, as much as a year or two, what is the danger to the other 2 sections as we're waiting for each section to actually get its final designation and its vote by the council? What are the dangers to the buildings within those sections during that period?
Since Gail Brewer, Councilmember Gail Brewer, is such an important part of this process, and Jessie Bodine is here from her office, I wanted to just say, Jessie, please feel free to field this question.
Unfortunately, whispered in my ear, so you might have to
But about the
repeat the
3
question.
separate parts as they're sort of going through the process, and is there,
Okay, since there have to be 3 different hearings and the council's eventually going to vote. We have the first hearing, there's a certain timetable for which city planning has to look at it, and then the city council and so on. What is the danger to the other 2 sections as we're waiting for that first section until the next section comes and then the third section? What are the dangers to the buildings in those other 2 not yet established districts during that period?
Sure. The whole extension is calendar right now. So what that means is it's any owner or any shareholder or anything was going to make any types of changes that would affect the facade or the outside of the buildings, it would pop up on a DOB screen. Like, for example, our office has helped a number of folks already who are doing very minor changes, like a punch out to an air conditioning, sleeve or something like that. But of course it pops up on DOB saying it's calendared for landmarking, so nothing's going anywhere until LPC looks it over. And so it goes back to LPC. LPC is on the staff level, and again, the experts are all sitting here. So if I say anything incorrect, please tell me if I'm wrong. And then they can proceed as long as it's not going to be something that would be drastically affecting the building. And again, LPC has to sign off. So it is not as though DOB just says no, and then the person is sitting there going, well, I had this work plan for 2 years, and now I can't do it. That doesn't happen. LPC would look at it, and there would be an evaluation of it.
So the calendaring.
What you're asking about is the calendaring protects the entire district.
There's a level of protection already by calendar.
There's a level of protection. In addition, no matter how it's going to be broken down, we'll get that. We'll obviously figure that information out as quickly as possible. Whether it's going to be voted on by phase or voted on as a whole. In addition, obviously, you know, Gail is a supporter of this, and in general, this is how land use items work in the council is, the council members are going to listen to the member whose district it is. Now, that does not mean, again, I will repeat what everybody else has already said here, does not mean that this is a fait accompli, and we should not assume that we don't have to show up to every hearing, because there will be LPC hearings, there's going to be council hearings, which are extremely important as well, because the land use committee on the city council has a subcommittee that has a land use subcommittee. Now they were gonna first hear this there. Now that's really where you're gonna have the support, because the land use committee would take the note from the subcommittee. So that when that hearing comes along, and whether that comes in a phase level or in one big final hearing at the end, is important to know, because we need to show up for that.
Jesse, who's on that subcommittee?
The chair is a good question.
Brad Lander. Subcommittee?
Experts
Yes.
now.
I can give you the list.
Yeah, we can get the list out. And so, I will say this, reaching out to those folks on that subcommittee makes a difference. Just like and Mel from Newport 7 can adhere to that for something like Riverside Center that got passed earlier through the land use committee just on a development side. Reaching out to those subcommittee hearing council members and just saying support. And so they know when they come to the hearing, they can say, yeah, I've gotten 500, I've gotten 1,000 emails, I've gotten, Gail keeps track of that as well. So, and she would always listen to the member whose district it is, but nonetheless, if she gets 500 emails saying, this is something you need to support, she's gonna listen. And so they'll listen too, and the chair of the committee should be reached out to, and of course the speaker. But again, just to repeat, come to the hearings, the LPC hearings, gotta come to the council hearings, and it's all very helpful.
Point of information, Andrew Berman from the Greenwich Village Historic District discovered that a lot of the buildings that had been calendared were not in the database of the Department of Buildings as being calendared. How do we ensure that every one of these 800 buildings is listed in the DOB database as having been calendared, so no action is taken?
We'll have to leave them up. We have a specific building at 12-14 West 68th Street that put an additional story on a building, only to find out that the DOB did not have it on its topic. They've been working much harder to get all of these buildings in the calendar, but there's always a problem, and I think that that's just one more thing that we need to see if we can make sure that.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is this is a multi-step process, and in the emails that you will all receive as a follow-up to this meeting, we will be very clear and very specific as to what needs to happen when. But like Arlene was saying, eternal vigilance, that's the only way that we're going to see this process through. It's getting towards 9:30, and I know many of you have to move on with your days, but I see one more question here.
I think that it's more a statement of concern, and that is, if we start with parceling out the district in 3 pieces, my concern is that by the time we get to the 3rd piece, the energy of the people involved and the time it's taken will dissipate the energy that we need to make sure it's the whole district.
Can I just make sure to say that your district has been incredible. That's from 89 to 109th Street, and when they turn out, you get 500 people to turn out, so I'm hoping that you're going to do. I don't worry so much about you, I worry about what Cindy Billy, I think, is around, and she does an incredible job. Richard Emery, I must say, we're incredibly lucky to have Richard. He really does have his finger on the pulse, so I think that children, our marching orders from Richard and...
I'll trade myself for Arlene any day.